This whole
we want,
enterprise is starting to
yeah.
become like hilarious. I feel like we're in one of these planetary stories by Lafferty.
We're almost around the planet. Here we go.
Yeah,
Really, we've almost made it.
yeah.
That's your opening of the
Just think of
video right there.
Snuffles is about like what was it like 30 meters away or something? Just that he's chasing us, so we got to get through to the end here. Okay, here we go. Um, Hi, folks. I'm Dan Peterson, aka Dr. Rocker, and this is another episode of The Hole on the Corner. And here we round out our epic discussion, panel discussion, finally having guests on this YouTube channel on Lafferty. And we've been talking about our stories with science fiction and Lafferty in the first story. And then we talked about these 5 planetary tales by Lafferty and, you know, kind of bumbled our way through them. And I think a really rich discussion, but that also left us half bewildered. And now we are about to end that out with one of the most bewildering stories he wrote called Thieving Bear Planet. So once again, in case you're just jumping in here, I will throw it to the guys to introduce themselves.
I'm Richard Rempel, and I run a channel called Vintage SF.
I'm Virgil, and my channel is Literally Books.
I'm Chris, and I am half of Liminal Spaces.
Cool. And I'm going to say at the top, I'll say it at the end as well, but I just want to really thank these guys for coming on and doing this with me. It's been such a pleasure. And I do recommend their channels. I've really enjoyed slowly but surely kind of getting to know the diverse thing that each one of them does that yet also overlaps. And now because of reading Lafferty and us having these conversations, they're overlapping here as well. So it's really fun and cool. And these discussions are really bringing some fresh stuff out of Lafferty, which is really exciting. So we're going to talk about Thieving Bear Planet now. And I want to mention here that there is a whole Laffertian bear thing. I don't know if you guys know this yet. It's not just Snuffles and, sort of in this Thieving Bear Planet thing. There's a what I call an Ursus Laffertius. These bears that come up again and again, and I'll just name a few places you can find them. There's a short story called "And Name My Name" that has some talking bears in it, along with other talking animals, and it is an awesome story. And another one that's kind of like, whoa, what is going on here? Really beautiful. And another one called Boomer Flats, which involves some like Bigfoot people that, in a way, are half bears. And it's really awesome. Bears come up in the historical novel of the Choctaw people called Oklahanali. A couple of funny moments with bears in there that are really cool. Talking bears again come up in Serpent's Egg. There's a which is a later novel, one of the more experimental novels. Really great. It has a group of talking animals that have been enhanced and made intelligent. And one is they're all like tweens or something. And there's one called Mother Dubu, because she's like the scout mother of the group, even though she's a kid like them. And she has these like wisdom sayings that she says all the time and stuff. She's a great bear character. And a brief mention in Annals of Klepsis mentions a family, I think, of golden bears from Astrobe, of all places, which wow. I don't think there's any mention of that in Past Master. That's the planet where Astrobe is the main planet, or that's the novel in which Astrobe is the planet. And but there's this family of bears from Astrobe on this other planet, Klepsis. So yeah, and that's far from the only places that bears come up. So just want to mention, bears are a big thing with Lafferty, and I really like bears, so I think it's cool that he brought them up so much. So, Thieving Bear Planet. This story opens with another mention of just this whole, interconnection of planets. And in this one, it mentions something called a directory and delineation of planets. And it says that every so often somebody gets really excited about adding to this directory, and somebody who wants to like clear up anomalies. And I think that's one of the biggest tying together themes of these planetary stories that we've looked at, is each one is an anomaly in some way. And in each case, there's a team of people who try to clear up some anomaly. And as we've seen each time, it's just not happening. That is not Lafferty's universe. You don't clear up anomalies. I think you learn to live with them is what I'm getting from his stories. I don't know what you guys think.
Or to not live
Definitely.
with them.
Okay. What do you mean by that? Oh, you mean like die?
Well, they're inhabitable planets that are uninhabitable or uninhabited.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah, maybe that's part of it, is like you learn that there are anomalies, you can't resolve them, so give a respectful birth to these things. Maybe that's it. Ooh, this is another hard one to summarize. So again, a team of astronauts land on a planet. It is just called Thieving Bear Planet. And this is not the first expedition. It is one of many that have arrived. And each one, like in previous stories, has ended, their report at the end says, like, in this case, before it was things like you wouldn't believe it and different stuff like that. And in this case, I believe what they say is we can't remember. It's just like, we almost had it down and then we forgot what happened. And we'll see how that turns out by the end of the story. And so there's this mystery about what's going on this planet. And one of the first things they encounter when they come down in their ship is what they call the plane of old spaceships, which I love that phrase and just picturing it, because what they see is these like outlines. I always picture almost like chalk outlines of the previous ships that have landed there in this like field, in this plain, and kind of forming a half circle or something. And they come and they land in that same area. And this is in two halves, two very, very distinct halves, this story. And they're, again, Roman numeral 1 and 2. And in the first half, their encounter is all about these thieving bears. And it seems to, as far as I can tell, it actually all takes place within the ship itself. But maybe there's some of it that's not. And it's just all about the weird encounter with these things. And personally, I love this part of the story. I just, as soon as they show up and start doing stuff, I just think it's amazing for my taste. And I'll be interested to see what you guys think. But they can't figure out what they are. They are small. They're called bears, but they're not bears. It says they're more like pack rats meets flying squirrels that float around in a manner that is a little, eventually they start thinking there's something maybe insect-like about them, maybe plant-like about them. And they are jokesters and pranksters, and they call them tittering obscenities, and they're just like giggling all the time and playing jokes and stealing stuff while they're thieving bears. And they steal all these French horror novels from one character and a bunch of comic books from another one, and they read them to each other and stuff. And they're mimics. They mimic what they do, not unlike Snuffles. They seem to have some kind of barking type speech where they can mimic back what the humans say to them, and they float around and stuff, and they begin to eat the food right out of the stomachs, not physically, like they don't like tear into them and eat the food out of the stomachs of the humans. They do it some other way that we don't understand, but they eat this big meal and then they feel hungry again because it was all taken away from them. And then it gets weirder. They start eating the thoughts out of these human explorers. And they're like, I can't remember my ideas anymore and stuff, And so they have this like weird relationship, and it gets weirder. And they start doing, again, this is one is definitely spoilery in a certain sense, but not to me as much as Snuffles. So I'll see what you guys think of that. But so I guess maybe I'll leave it there, because they seem to, they seem to kill someone or disappear someone or something. And then everything just shifts into the second scene where the thieving bears for a moment just recede to the background and are just really no part of the story until it's kind of explained what they were to begin with. But it becomes about, the first part was about these cool little floating bears. And the second part is about, you'd never guess it, space ghosts.
I'm glad that you said it that way.
It's just like, yeah. And not just any old space ghosts, electric space ghosts who on stormy nights get filled with lightning so that they can fill out their form and start walking around. And these are like human ghosts of humans, right? And so they interact with one of the main characters that we've seen in the background of all the other stories, called John Chancel, who's like an early discoverer of all these planets. And they just have this chat with this lightning-filled ghost in the cockpit, and he starts explaining all this stuff to him, and it's an awesome conversation. And it gets into what was happening in the first half of the story, which I did not expect Lafferty to do here, that he would like really bring around like an explanation of what was going on there and a couple of super awesome tricks that he played on the reader that I'm going to point out in detail, or at least one of them that I can identify. And it rounds out with a little bit of a confrontation with one of these more aggressive ghosts that's going to be a surprise cameo from a previous story. And they basically escape, and as they escape, they see what that plane of old spaceships was about. Again, this is one of Lafferty's most front to back tied together stories I've ever seen. And that's the end of the story. So jump in, guys, if you can help with that synopsis at all. I am not the synopsis guy.
I think you did pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start by reading one of the things from the beginning, where you get a bit of one of the former reports, something that somebody said. It's John Chancel, in fact, himself. And it says about this planet: it offers no threat to human life or activity, no danger to bodily health, and only slight danger to mental health. The great John Chancel had written about it a century before this. It has almost uniformly ideal climate, though it is not a place to generate sudden wealth. It is serene in environment and in ecological balance, and it is absolutely caressing in its natural beauty. But it does have a strange effect on some of its visitors. It forces them to write things that are untrue, as it is forcing me to do at this moment. And then the narrator says, that was an odd thing to write in a ship's log. So watch out for lies, from the get-go here, which is, Lafferty's style, the liar's aesthetic from the tall tale and so on. But yeah, so I just wanted to start off with that little lie aspect there, which I thought was really funny. Also, it says toward the beginning of this, that with this planet and others that were explored, and this is another one that explicitly ties some of these stories together, it says that things, as with other planets, things go wrong here in the most pleasant way possible. And I think that kind of sums up what all these planetary stories are like. At least it's pleasant for us as the readers in the little journey we go on, maybe not the characters so much.
So I have a question. Did they mention anybody dying in the earlier visits?
I don't remember.
And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm confused about Dixie.
Oh man, I can't wait to get into Dixie. Go ahead.
And this might be the one I was thinking of, where I think the Thieving Bears, and I'm probably jumping way too far into this right away, killed their idea of Dixie, but not Dixie herself.
That's an awesome interpretation. I do not think that is correct. I now want somebody to write a story where that happens, but you might be right. But
I'm going to look through the story a little bit while we're talking, so keep going.
There's something going on there that you're trying to puzzle out, but I think the solution is a little bit different, and I actually think it's pretty crystal clear.
Okay, yeah, I got confused there.
I'll be honest, I don't think I fully grasped it until this read, and this would be, I don't know, my sixth read or something across the years of this story.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out. They seemed like one of my areas of study was Japanese myth and folktale, and these things remind me a ton of tanuki. What
is that?
Well, it's translated as a raccoon dog. It's a type of raccoon in Japan, but in myth they are shapeshifters and mischievous, kind of little thieving bears. So as I was reading this, I was really wondering because there's a point where they all shapeshift to look like the corpses of Dixie. Mm-hmm. And they all jump up and laugh and run off. And for me, this strongly connected to Tanuki culture in Japan. And I don't have any idea if he even knew about that at all. But yeah, it was interesting that they're and of course later they become ghosts. That I believe the ghosts are taking the form of the bears when there's not enough electricity for them to take on the body of their ghosts. But yeah, that was just a weird thought I had. But no, I couldn't figure out Dixie. I would love to hear.
I hope there's somebody, like, I've been worried about spoilers and stuff, but I hope there are people watching this who've never read this. Just hearing you say some of the things you just said, it's like, are you not intrigued enough yet about Lafferty? Come on, man, get into this. You know, like
Totally. I was
my God.
yeah, I was like I reread part of the story today, and I was sort of like, to help me like form it in my head, I started like relating it to my wife, my mom, and I was just like, and then this, and they're just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, but like the ghosts are like fill up their bodies with electric, but sometimes they ride the bears if there's not. And it was just, she's like, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buy the book. And like this is, I'm like, I just got my, I was like, they just kind of, they're like, what? I'm like, I know it seems weird. And they buy it, they steal a bunch of French novels, the French Gothic novels, and then they start recreating events from one of the novels. They created like a
Yeah.
novel. And I'm like, sorry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't go there, but it was just so fun to relate.
Go on. Dude, I don't care. I just have to say that, so there's a time difference. All these guys are in the States and I'm over here in Scotland. And it is like literally the middle of the night at this point. I am getting slap happy. And this is like the perfect like slumber party story to start while I'm exhausted and sleep deprived. I think I'm just gonna be a thieving bear and giggle and titter my way through this conversation.
Fair enough.
Because like you guys summing this up is killing me. Like it's so funny. Oh, okay.
Well, you know what? I want to go to a few quotes so that people have an idea of what they're dealing with here with these thieving bears. I actually picture them more like a large fluff of dandelion with a core that is the bear itself floating around. And here's some quotes about them. Elton Fad says, "There are microbes and germs and viruses infecting me too, but they are about half my size and are known as the thieving bears." And so microbes, germs, and viruses are these bears. Or another quote is, "They came gliding in and ambling in, and they tagged the people gently as a breath. But whenever they touched the people, however briefly or lightly, they left what seemed to be very small entering marks. And they also left a redness like the stings of nettles." So once again, these are beings that infect you in some way. It seems like what he's getting at here.
Yeah, and what's really cool narratively about those quotes is they come in a little ways into the story. You've already encountered these things as these little, pack rat, squirrel, flying squirrel type things. You picture, I think initially you picture something kind of furry and mammalian and stuff. And then it's like getting weird. You're like, wait, what? It like leaves marks like nettles and stuff. And like, they're like viruses. I'm like, what are these things? So it's really nice atmospherically that way. The story is
truly alien and alien in ways you don't expect.
Yeah.
But then of course we enter into that ghost realm that we'll be talking about too.
And and that we'll get to Jeff Vandermeer's introduction to this story in the Best of Lafferty, which is one of my favorite introductions in this book. And he really locks into the alienness of these things and the way Lafferty generally is able to evoke aliens. And that makes a lot of sense coming from Vandermeer. If you've read, Annihilation or whatever, that he would lock onto that with Lafferty. I want to go back though and riff on, go down this tiny rabbit trail real quick about what Chris said with Japanese stuff. It just so happens that, let me try to say this briefly. In my PhD thesis, I was dealing with this idea I called the eco-monstrous or eco-monstrous poetics. So I had to deal with a lot of monster theory, like what are monsters, what do they mean, etc. And I was really unhappy with a lot of what I was getting from what people have said in monster theory. I felt it was quite narrow and just about this kind of one thing over and over again. And I was casting about for a broader understanding of the monster. And among various sources that I found, both sort of philosophical and cultural, so this would also include some indigenous ideas of monstrosity and from around other parts of the world. But one of the main things I latched onto was Japanese yokai or yokai.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly how to say
That's
that.
correct. Yep.
So I was amazed that you just brought that up. I didn't know about those ones in particular, and I wasn't writing about this story either. But the range of what monsters mean in terms of yokai and that culture and generally is much more like what Lafferty does, where it's not this like strict good, evil, malevolence or the demonizing of some other person. It's just a lot of weirdness and strangeness and a lot of things that are in between, and things are dangerous oftentimes, but that doesn't, there's just a lot going on there. Things can even be like sacred and stuff, and indeed can be evil and what have you. And I found that like that sounds more like what Lafferty's doing with monsters and the monstrous. And so I think this story is a pretty good example of that. So also on that note, and we mentioned like back in the first video, like Thundar the Barbarian and stuff. Another show I watched as a kid was Thundercats, and then they made that reboot of it, which I actually thought was brilliant. Is really good. I don't know if you remember. Did anybody see that by any chance? Okay, it's really good. It's like better than the original series. It's really awesome. There's a scene where these like little like robo bears, they're like furry but with some metal parts, come and like climb all over their vehicles and mess about with them and stuff. And Lafferty fans on the Facebook page or whatever were like posting pictures of it, going, it's the Thieving Bears, and stuff like that. And when I saw it, I immediately thought of Thieving Bears and stuff. So just kind of funny little connections to like Japanese culture and animation and different things like that.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the Japanese yokai are circumstantial. They are just they happen into a circumstance that corrupts them, and they become a monster in some way. And I think that's really interesting concept. I hadn't thought of that in connection to this story, but it makes a lot of sense, because I don't feel like these thieving bears these ghosts are in any way malicious. They thieve, they take, and it makes me wonder, because then I want to get into the mythology of this, like what came first, like the ghosts or their form of thieving bears. The first people that landed here, how did the main astronaut guy, I forgot his name, the heroic original astronaut,
John Chancel,
how did Chancel get this ghost taken out of him if he was the first to land there? Is the planet the Thieving Bears? Like this opens up so much mythology about this planet, and I don't know. I have no answers. It's just a question that came up.
I think the Thieving Bears are stealing my thoughts. I actually believe the book I'm looking for is right here behind me somewhere, and I want to see it so bad I can't see it. And I don't even know that this is a very important point. But I think the scholar's name is Michael Foster. He's a Western scholar of yokai. He's got 2 great books about it. And he's who I drew on for my thesis. And he uses this wonderful phrase in there to sum up a lot of what yokai are about. He calls it the monsterful. So not the monstrous, but like the monstrous meets the wonderful, the monsterful. And and I was saying this because Chris was talking about how, I can't remember even how you worded it, and it was just a minute ago, but that, these are some kind of liminal thing or unexplainable thing, or, it's not just like, wow, I'm really starting to...
What was his name again?
Michael Foster, I think.
Okay, let me check really quick. Give me 1 second.
And I don't know. Obviously, Chris is doing this, but because I don't know this. The order I read these in is I read Snuffles first, and then I read Thieving Bear. And I don't know that there's a direct connection. I'm going to say that, but I felt that there was a direct connection, and I felt that the Thieving Bears were like descendants or something, or like children of Snuffles. Well, that isn't. I know that there's probably nothing in there, but I've had that feel of it, that they would, or probably not necessarily, but maybe it's sort of like an indirect sequel or something. I don't know. Yeah. I just had that energy. about it, about these. That's just there. That's how they felt. And then I loved when this horrible story flipped. I just loved the flip. I just I liked it, and then it flipped, and I was like, oh, this is so good. I love this so much. These ghosts have their bodies laying around, and like we push, sometimes we pump them up with lightning, but if that's not working, we ride these bears.
Yeah.
And it was just I enjoyed this one the most of them, but it definitely is a story that I feel like I want to reread, and I guess that's Wolf-like, right? Wolf, it feels like you have to reread to get it. And this one, it's like you want to reread to get more. If that makes sense, there's a distinction there, I guess.
Yeah.
And it seems like great. Bears. It seems like bears are a short form for something for Lafferty. I think you were talking about this at the beginning, Daniel.
Yeah.
That now when I see a bear in a story, I automatically think, all right, there is something weird happening here. It's not face value. And there's something more powerful going on here.
Yeah. One thing I didn't get to say about Snuffles, amongst many, I really felt like my brain was starting to melt by the time we were going on with that one. With their etymology of the bear and stuff, and their sort of cultural anthropology of the bear, they set out all these ideas of what the bear is. And this is, again, what I went into in detail in my videos on Snuffles. But they talk about him being like a smasher, a devourer, a king, a god, a creator, a ghost, all these things. And in the story, more or less, Snuffles displays every one of those things that they talk about, which is really cool. And I feel the thing you just described there, Richard, I feel like Snuffles is a very early story for Lafferty. It's one of his first published from 1960, which is amazing to me. That kind of story was one of the first things that came out from Lafferty. I feel like it's this programmatic story of like, let me lay the primordial groundwork for bears in my fiction. You know what I mean? And then that's why you get that feeling every time you see a bear come up in Lafferty. You're like, whoa, something a little bit going on here. And it's going to be like this range of things that involve smasher, devourer, ghost, toy, like all kinds of little weird incompatible or seemingly incompatible sort of resonances and things that give it that odd feel. And he remember he said that a bear was like a caricature of other animals, that it was like an ogre and a toy and gosh, I can't even remember that.
Well, he says at one point that straight up people that have never seen bears have toy bears. And all these concepts that like the bear is somehow omnipresent in all of our lives, even if we've never seen a bear. Which I forgot about that part. That's really interesting.
And so I think that is partly why Virgil also, that you said that you when you read this, and I love what you said there, actually, that's perfect, because I felt the exact same resonance the very first time I read this story. I was like, oh, Snuffles part 2, and like you said, like an indirect sequel. I love that. It's like perfect. It somehow feels, even though in many ways it's very, very different, and the creatures themselves are very different, it feels like a diptych or a companion piece to me. But regardless, I think we're getting some of that, like what he set up there with bears. You get a little signal of that every time they come up in his stories. You're like, okay, Lafferty and bears, here we go. So what were you off getting there, Chris?
I was trying to find my books on yokai, and I can't. I think the Thieving Bear stole mine because they should be right there. What's your Dixie theory? I really want to hear it.
I am going to save that for a little bit.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Let's go through the story in order a bit and get to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. There's more quotes about the bears that I might want to read at some point, but let me just say here that when he likens them to pack rats, he gives the scientific name for them, which he does scatters throughout his fiction. He'll give a scientific name for an animal. And here it's Neotoma cinerea. I don't know how to pronounce that. And you look, you Google that or you Wikipedia it, and that's the pack rat or the bushy-tailed wood rat, as it's also known. And of course, no surprise, it is distinctly part of the upper southwest of the states on up into the northwest of the states on up into Western Canada. That's its region. So my only point there being that once again, Lafferty has brought the Southwest to the stars, and he doesn't just go like, here's a monkey or here's a giraffe or something. He tends to use animals that he kind of knows, that are part of his whole general bioregion and stuff. So I just think that's a fun aspect here.
I think they're interesting also because it appears in the first part of the story that their only purpose is to consume and to sneak into people's things to consume, even sneaking into their biology to consume so that they don't even get nutrition from their food. They're thieves of all things that they can consume.
Wow. That's really interesting, which is interesting too. And the next thing that I was going to bring up in thinking of this as an indirect sequel to Snuffles, in many ways, they're literally the opposite of Snuffles. They're multiple instead of one. It says that they're small instead of huge. They're toothless and clawless. It says totally unlike Snuffles. And yet here they are like consuming everything. You know what I mean? So they still bring across that both the clownishness of Snuffles, but with, I don't know if you guys got that sense, but some sense of something frightening or scary or just a little creepy, if anything, I guess,
Yep. Richard's quote about them with the entry point. That was very horrific because it was kind of funny and cute. And then Dixie with the doll, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then the entry point that they enter you.
Yeah.
And then when they started taking their ideas and thoughts is when, for me, it started taking on horror characteristics.
Yeah. Here, I'll read out a few more passages of sort of their physical description. It says, the thieving bears, however large they seemed, gave the impression of being nearly weightless. They had to be nearly weightless to glide on the wind the way they did. They seemed to be mostly, well, it wasn't hair and it wasn't feathers. They seemed to be mostly made out of a fluffy and deep piled covering with not much body inside it. And I think, Richard, your comment about this like dandelion fluffer, I can't remember if that's what you said. I think that fits really well with that. I'm not at all surprised you got that impression from some of the things said like that. It even then says the bears had to be 90% fluffy covering and no more than 10% body. Otherwise, big as they seemed, they couldn't have gotten through some of the holes that they had to go through. So on and so on. And actually, my next quote was what Richard read out there about touching them and leaving the marks. So yeah.
One thing I noticed when we get like this detailed list of stuff that they just come on the ship and they just start devouring, was I'm like, this seems strange that these certain things were called out. So I kind of like tried to see like what's the significance of this or that item, and I thought it was a little interesting to me. I'll read a little section of it right here. It's not very long. They stole Selma's candy and Dixie's snuff. They stole by drinking on the spot George Mahoon's He-Man scent - cinnamon, 13 bottles of it. But they did not drink any of the other scents. They went wild over mustard, emptying whole containers of it. And I thought that the cinnamon and mustard were weird because, and I looked up cinnamon, and there's some connection with cinnamon and salt for ghosts, like repelling ghosts. There's some connection there. And mustard seed is literally eye of newt from, like, so there's a little bit of like suggestion of some like witchcraft or something. Maybe. I mean, I just see the suggestion of mustard, and I'm like, well, that's such a weird thing. I mean, it just they ate so much of it. I thought, well, maybe that must have some significance. I don't know.
Well, I mean, since you brought up the mustard thing, another fact about the pack rats, the actual animals, mustard plants are in their diets. Okay. So I don't know if Lafferty was directly drawing on that.
Yeah, just that could be too.
But I mean, I don't think that's the whole of that, but that was interesting too.
It was just something I noticed, and I thought, well, I don't know, I'll bring it up.
Nice. Another parallel with Snuffles, where again it's an opposite, is that it said on the planet that not only did physical things ferment so they could make cheese and wine really quick. Remember that? It said that their thoughts fermented, and that's why they were having all these philosophical conversations. Here, it's the opposite. Their thoughts are being stolen. You know what I mean, from them. I just think that's an interesting little opposite parallel to Snuffles.
That's where I had my one other quote I pulled out of here. This one stuck with me. I read the story twice, and this one really stuck with me. Somebody is eating all my ideas right out of my head and leaving only the hulls of them. And then this is the sentence. Did you know that notions are only the shells or hulls of ideas after the meat is eaten out of them? I keep thinking about that one. That just, there's something profound there that I still haven't really teased out of it.
I've got that quote down too. Yeah, totally. Yeah. You know what it made me think of is when I went through my ridiculous videos going through just other people's like reviews of Past Master. One of them said this thing about the whole novel Past Master is just a string of notions loosely tied together. And I argued against that. I said that it was actually a novel of ideas, of very concrete ideas, not just notions. And that while they were loosely tied together, they're meaningfully tied together. But anyway, the point being ideas versus notions. And I'm trying to bear that out in my slow go through Past Master. And I was like, Lafferty knows what I'm talking about. You know, like, look at this. Like, he's like, notions are, you know, ideas with the meat stolen out of them. And I was like, yes, that's what I mean. Like, Past Master is a meaty novel, despite all its weirdness and kind of raucous chaos and stuff. It's not just a like whimsical, like whatever. It's a deep meditation on stuff. There's meat there. So I just thought that was an interesting parallel here.
I love that quote, Richard. And it's funny because the way that I tried to connect it throughout the story is I wondered who left the planet and what part of them stayed, right? Because that's what this is about. So like, what are these ghosts? And I might be jumping ahead. I'm sorry if I am. But it's interesting that the people that left, are they notions of people? And are the meat of the people still here on the planet? Is that what the ghosts are? That's kind of.
I would go the other way. Well, we should wait till we get to that part.
Right. Sorry.
No. That it's fine to bring it up. I just want to keep pulling us back to like get through some of these bits first, because I think coming on the ghosts after all the stuff that leads up to it, because I think the two main like set pieces that are really juicy before this are the sheer thieving bears and their stealing and all that, and then the Dixie Late Lark. What a great name! Speaking of Lafferty names, Dixie Late Lark, the fetish doll, and then the life-size fetish dolls, and them having imitated her. All that precedes, you know, that's a story enough right there, man. That is just brilliant. And then he's like, oh yeah, by the way, lightning-filled ghosts, and that's really what all that was about. And, you know, so let me read out a few of these things. They're talking at the table, I think, and it says, a little doll made out of wax and rags with thorns and pins and needles sticking clear through it, and with its throat cut horribly, came sailing through the air and landed on the table. The tortured little doll had Dixie Late Lark's face on it. Its mouth was wide open, and it was screaming silently and horribly. And when that part came on for me, I was just like, this story is so cool. And like, just, wow. It was, I mean, it had me in one kind of headspace with these thieving bears, and then went here. And it's going to tie them together in a pretty gobsmacking way. And then I love this bit right after that. It says that Gladys pushed her forefinger against the mouth of the little fetish doll to close it, but the doll bit her finger suddenly, viciously, terribly, and set the blood gushing from it. When Gladys got her finger loose again, the doll opened its mouth wide once more and continued to scream silently and horribly from a now blood-dribbling mouth. And then it makes this little comment that it's long been noted that fetish dolls seem to have a life of their own. And then it says that little comic interlude cheered them all a bit, and they left the table in a happier state.
That was the weirdest sentence of the whole story to me.
Yeah.
That they all of a sudden thought, ha, 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 let's go. This is very funny. This is terrifying.
Right.
I'm entering into a horror movie here.
Right.
Well, and there's Virgil's witchcraft even more.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Also,
yeah.
I just want to bring up, because I this part stuck with me really, really big. They were like, "Wait, wasn't Dixie just sitting with us?"
Mm-hmm.
And their chairs are close enough to each other that there's no way Dixie would even fit. And this is when I got super confused about Dixie.
I believe that it's going to be explained like literally and perfectly, but still in a way that makes you go, "What?" Like, so we'll get there. Let's do the life size one. Okay, it says that. Okay, I can't remember what leads up to this. I think it's when they first discover her body. Yeah, and this is the description of it. Dead Dixie Latelark was an exact life-sized replica of her own many times transfixed fetish doll. Her throat was just as flamboyantly and terribly cut as the doll's had been. The same thorns and pins and needles ran through her, but now they were meter-long thorns and 2-meter-long needles, and her mouth was very wide open, as had been that of the doll, and Dixie was likewise screaming horribly and silently, and a tittering, a giggling in the Thieving Bear's fashion was coming from her silently screaming mouth and also from her laid open throat. How ghastly, it says. I don't mean, like, I stopped and thought about, I'm getting some goosebumps about it right now, just thinking of this like cut throat with a giggle coming out of it, like
with meter-long needles shoved through it.
What? And it just gets weirder because they're all freaked out by that, and then it's like, oh, in a second they felt a little better because someone goes, oh, there's another one over here, another life-size slit throat Dixie Latelark. And it says, yes, it was another horribly dead Dixie Latelark with her throat cut even more savagely, with her poor body transfixed with even longer thorns and needles, with the tittering and giggling from her wide open and silently screaming mouth even more disconcerting. And then it says, in all, they found 7 life-sized versions of Dixie Latelark horribly and ritually murdered, ritual witchcraft. Then all 7... It's unbelievable, just stack on stack on stack. Then all 7 of them jumped up, turned into rather young thieving bears, and ran away tittering. Come on.
Yeah, they made like a little like a gothic novel farce, and I did it or something, and it's just like
very well
put.
Whose books were the French horror stories?
Oh,
Dixie's.
Were they?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It said like apparently I even tried to like look this up and I can't find anything about it. But it said that there's like a doll fetish thing in French horror, and that there's a particular character called Screaming Mimi that they're representing here or mimicking. So for me, and that's the thing, for me, like this level of, as Virgil just put it, like gothic farce is good enough in and of itself. Like it's like he could end the story and I'm like, that was awesome. But the fact that he then ties it together narratively, as I hope we'll see in a moment, and also makes it this profound meditation on humanity or psychology, or what it means to be a thinking, sentient person, and how we get sort of dislocated from our very selves in ways, and what the dislocation of ourselves then hungers for. I don't know if you're following any of that, but even if that doesn't make exact sense, but to me, that sounds like the moves of a very deep philosophical thought, you know, arising through this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but this is one of my very favorite Lafferty stories. So I'm really freaking out here because this is the kind of thing that makes me go, Lafferty is a Borges, or who's your person? Italo Calvino, I don't know. Maybe go a different direction, James Joyce or something, I don't know. But like he's that like genius level literary like magician, you know, that and I've said this on my channel a number of times. I'm just going to drop it in here again. I actually think Lafferty is a little bit above Wolfe. I know Wolfe seems way more literary and robust than Lafferty, but I think Lafferty is hiding a deeper level of sophistication on many levels, like literarily and philosophically and stuff. in a bunch of silliness so that you just don't see it right away. But that's just my take, and I don't really care. I'm not going to die on that hill. I don't care.
Oh, no.
Everybody can say it's better.
Well, it's easy. It's easy with comedy and everybody does this with something that's humorous, to dismiss it as being frivolous. But this is obviously not frivolous. I mean, so yeah, I can see that. I think that he can make it work so well and be funny is a real testament to writing skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, to take another American funny writer, I don't know if you guys have read any Mark Twain. I had read some in the past, but I had to teach Huckleberry Finn at one point and read through that. And I had never really read that novel, and it's profound, and it's very silly and full of like tall tale type stuff and down home and whatever, but it's a profound book. You know what I mean? And I think Lafferty is kind of writing in that tradition of like, this is hilarious American Western humor and it's deep, like for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I just wanted to show those scenes of Dixie Late Lark. Is there anything else we want to say about this first half before we move to the second half?
Is the explanation for Dixie in the second half?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh man, I'm hoping you guys did not see the trick. I can't.
Well, I didn't. I tell you.
I can't wait to show you. Okay, so how would you guys characterize this second half of the story? If you want to, if you have anything to say about that.
Well, I'm not sure if you're talking about that trick. I visualize that plane of spaceships as the final revelation or trick. And I think maybe I don't want to go there yet.
Yeah, let's not go there yet.
Yeah.
That is not the trick I'm talking about.
Okay.
But that, honestly, I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that even existed, that was part of the story. And when I saw that exact description when it happened at the end, I was like, oh, no way. How many things can you pack into this story?
I think that's the central image. But we can get into that later.
Yeah. And that's the connection from the beginning to the end, which makes this one of his strongest narrative stories.
Yes.
I've said before when I've talked about my story here that I found him frustrating because I couldn't find a narrative through a story necessarily. This one had a strong narrative throughout, even though it was two parts. That second part really looped back to explain what was happening. And even though there's some things we still wonder about, it's got a strong continuity and a strong sense of completing the circle of the story.
100%. And I really, this time through, that hit me like never before. I think I'm a weird reader. I admit I'm a very weird reader. I just like go in for like, I'm just there to have a crazy time when I read stuff, and my plot is just not forefront to me. So this story especially just made my mind pop off with all this craziness, and I just liked it for that. And I knew there was a little more going on. I picked up on some of it before, but this time through I was like, this is like narrative gold here, like the way it and this is where it's also one of my favorites, in that he doesn't let up on the experimentation or whatever else you want to call it, avant-garde or whatever sort of quality to this story. Like it's one of his most like that to me, but also one of his most narratively tied together. So wow, he just really came together on this one. So okay, I'd like to read some bits of this second bit then, because it just also, this is the thing, like Lafferty doesn't do like a ton of description, as we've talked about. He's tight or concise and all that kind of thing. So he really does a lot of description in the story and gives you several different sets of descriptions. The whole thieving bear thing, and they're floating, and what are they? The whole Dixie Late Lark and the fetish dolls and the grotesquerie and the horror of that. And then this whole lightning and ghosts thing. And here, remember back in Snuffles, he really didn't describe the lightning. He just said, look, it's happening all the time. There's flashes between flashes. It's multicolored. That's about it. Check out what he does here when lightning comes on the scene. He says, the electric nights were highlighted, literally, by massive thunderstorms and plasmal displays, which I just loved immediately. I was like, what is a plasmal display? Anyway, then he goes, and then in parentheses, the odds are that these storms are more violent than the storms where you come from. And then he says, the lightning piled up on the high places, roaring like Lazarus lions. Then it rolled down the hills like waterfalls and formed hot and spitting pools on the lower plains and meadows. Like, what even is that? What does it mean for lightning to pool somewhere? Like, what? That is so cool. And did you notice the past master reference there?
Yes.
The Lazarus
Totally
lions. I'm like, that's so cool. I still don't know what Lazarus lions are in past master. I'm still trying to picture them. They're giant, though. I know that much. But like the lightning roaring like Lazarus lions. I mean, Lafferty does not do a lot of this, and when he does it, he makes it count, and it's like I just want to collect it. Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I couldn't help but think of Magnetic Mountain in Past Master,
right,
where there's that huge scene in that, and it's just like another display of lightning and power, and that he goes into.
Another thing I said in my Snuffles video was, in addition to this whole recurring bear thing, there's a recurring lightning thing for Lafferty. And again, I think it's tied to his bioregion. And I showed a bunch of pictures of Oklahoma lightning. It's insane. Like where I come from in Indiana is pretty intense with lightning. And especially compared to Scotland that has almost no lightning and it's only flashes. And then Oklahoma is like Indiana lightning times 10, you know? And I think Lafferty is just like, I grew up with lightning. I love lightning. It's going to be in every story. You know what I mean? It's going to be in the stars or whatever, you know. Like,
a southwest flash flood lightning storm is different than any other place I've ever been. You've been to Arizona a lot, Richard. I don't know if you've ever been caught in one of these downpours that you have to pull over because you literally can't see because of how much water. I mean, it is insane.
You have to do that in Indiana.
Just north of Lincoln, Nebraska. I got caught in one of those.
Yeah. Oh, maybe in the Midwest too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit. Nothing. Probably not as intense as you guys for me, but
I mean, it's crazy. It turns my street out here turns into a river, like 2 feet. We can go out wading. It's crazy, and they're about 10 minutes long. And then they're done.
Oh wow!
It's really wild. It's a deluge, a downpour, and the lightning is crazy.
Yeah. Another thing it made me think of, because I'm a big Cormac McCarthy fan, is particularly Cormac McCarthy's novel Blood Meridian has a lot of like really intense lightning displays in it, and this was one of those. I've felt a lot of parallels between Lafferty and McCarthy, and I wrote about that some in my thesis. But yeah, like this was one of those rare moments where it wasn't just that they both focused on lightning, but Lafferty's very language sounded a lot more like McCarthy's language. And if you've ever read McCarthy, that might be a big surprise because they have in some ways, quite different registers. You know, McCarthy is really verbose in like big words and long sentences and stuff. And Lafferty does a bit of that, but, you know, tends to be more concise. So to see him launch out like this, I was just like, that's so cool.
And it brings life to the ghosts. And that kind of made me think a little bit about Frankenstein and electricity and life.
Yeah. So let's go on to the ghosts then, the electric ghosts. This phrase, the ghosts walked on electric nights. How cool is that? And it says they were like ordinary, like, I don't even know what exactly this means, but ordinarily they're like empty balloons. And then it says, on the electric nights, they filled up with lightning and manifested themselves. And it says, but others of the ghosts were always low key, living out their endless nights and days till they would finally fade away after a long era. And it's from there that they start talking to the lightning-filled ghost of Chancel in the cockpit.
Yeah, I don't have much to say until we get to
I love the
Manslayer Crag or whatever.
All right. Well, okay, yeah. Well, we're pretty much to the part where I think, yes, we're almost to Dixie.
What is it? Is it Manslayer? Man Crusher Crag? I forgot his name.
Manbreaker Crag?
Manbreaker Crag.
But before him, we have the ghost of John Chancel.
Right.
Enjoying all the cockpit controls from a spaceship that's 100 years past when he was on the planet. And we find out that there's this essence that we have that are these ghosts that can be left behind when you leave the planet. In fact, it sounds like he's left this essence behind in multiple places, and these essences can communicate with each other. So
didn't he say there's 7 of him?
Yes.
Or was that Crag?
No, I think Chancellor said that. I think that's who Chancellor. Isn't that who Chancellor said?
One of them said there's 7 of me.
Yeah.
There's 7 ghosts of me on this planet. Well, I don't know if he said on this planet, but I thought that was very interesting, that this concept that it can be taken again and again. But Crag says that he refuses to take on the form of a thieving bear. That other ghosts will take on this form, but he's not going to take on that weak form of these bears. And this was my first introduction to Manbreaker Crag. And then in my second one, I had to text Virgil right away and be like, dude, Manbreaker Crag's in 2 of these.
Another one. It was a lot of fun.
Also, I've never heard. I mean, I guess I don't know if I've talked to anybody about Manbreaker Crag. Well, no, we talked about it in comments somewhere in the past, but I encountered it the opposite way around. I read 900 Grandmothers long before I ever came across Thieving Bear, and most other people I've talked to did it that way as well. So it's so cool that you encountered it the opposite way, and we're still like, no way, Manbreaker Crag. just for the record, he's in at least one more story that I know of that's collected in this chrysalis. It's a great title. It's called Quiz Ship Loose, and it's a crazy tale. It starts out with like children projecting psychic monsters, swamp monsters onto these astronauts that land, and then it basically just turns into this long conversation that's like an essay on post-consciousness. But anyway,
is he more of a main character in that one, or is he just still a bit piece?
He's more of a side character still.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was glancing through trying to see if he's consistent between the 3 stories, and he is on a certain level, but they are also a little bit hard to tie together. And I was also trying to picture at what point did he leave his ghost? No, because his ghost still has his body here. So this has to be the final. All these other stories with Manbreaker have to come before this because his body is here on the planet. I don't know if you remember it says that he keeps it. I feel like he keeps it in a cave.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he keeps it and he gets into it and zombies around a little bit every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The man. I've always called those, because they're the only 3 stories I know of that he's in. I call them the Manbreaker trilogy.
I think this is a really weird aside, but I think Michael Moorcock should write a book about, or a story about Manbreaker Crag. I think he would do a good job of marrying it together.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So on this notion of like leaving your ghost behind, first of all, let me just say, Lafferty for me drops in these moments of kind of profundity and like poignancy in the oddest ways, because he's not like overly like trying to say, like, get you to feel these deep things or something when he's doing all this. But when he talks about just leaving your ghost behind, or your essence or part of your essence somewhere you used to live or something like that, I'm just like, I'm like, whoa, I think he's talking about like something that humans actually do. It's it's like a metaphor or a fable of something about us as people and stuff. So I was just really kind of moved by that. And then he says that like that his physical person, Chancel, still has the physical brains, but I have the intuition. And he says, and we were never very good on brains anyhow. We had the mystique and the personality. We had the intuition. We guessed a lot and we faked a lot, but we were never a well-linked personality. And it's like, kind of like, yeah, it's like, imagine that, like leaving your intuition behind somewhere. I've still got my brains, but somewhere I lost my intuition back there on planet so-and-so, or back where I used to live or something. I don't know if that's hitting you guys, but I can't explain it much. I'm just like vibing with it right now.
That part actually hit me too, because that was when I first started developing the theory that he was critiquing exploration. Okay. And the type of people that we hero worship in exploration. And to me, it seems like all these stories are kind of a loss of innocence or a coming of age stories in really weird ways, not physically,
Okay.
but it's about the idea of exploration and space travel and the reality, even though it's the most unrealistic things possible. But in the end, they're leaving the planet missing a lot of their original exploring spirit.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that he takes it to the level of metaphysics. And just to be clear, by metaphysics, I mean in philosophy, which is like the study of reality or the study of being. So not metaphysics like levitating or something, although he probably folds in all that kind of stuff too. But just in the sense that, like, he's here picturing not only that you've left something behind, but then what you left behind has a life of its own, complete with hunger. Like, this part of yourself that you left behind is hungry for, I don't know what. Like, I think we'll kind of get into it as we see what Manbreaker says and what they eat and stuff. But I mean, that's just weird and strange, and I don't know what to make of it, but it's a thought. That's some kind of thought. He also says of his physical person that he's estranged from, he says that there would have been everlasting conflict if we had joined, but it was also psychic disaster, more for him than for me, for us to be separated, which is just, again, speaking to those tensions and stuff. And with your coming of age thought and all these different things, I also think strangely folded in here a bit too is what Richard said about trauma. I feel like that can kind of come into this as well. It says that these ghosts mainly want to feed on minerals. Now, I don't know what the hell's going on there. I don't know why. And it's when there's enough minerals around, they stay quiet and sleep, he says. But when there's not, that's when they go out looking for other stuff, like they've done with this crew, and eating up their stores and their thoughts and whatever else. So I don't know what to make of that, but it's a cool lore or mythology.
Minerals. That's interesting.
Okay, so are you ready for Dixie Late Lark?
Yeah. Let's hear the quote.
Oh boy.
He's so excited.
Oh my God. I just couldn't believe I never saw this before. Actually, hang on. I've got a nice reading copy here in Universe 12 of Thieving Bear. Somebody says, what happened to Dixie Late Lark? They are asking John Chancel. And he says, oh, she's a ghost of a different sort. You ready for this? Are you ready for this? I'm so sorry. Maybe I'll cut.
No, you're good. I love the
keep
energy.
it in. Keep it in.
Okay. There was never any Dixie Late Lark as a person. There were only the 6 of you who arrived here. Dixie was your esprit de groupe, your group effigy, and also a manifestation of your goofiness syndrome. But we made her visible to you for the first time, and you recognized her and accepted her in your unthinking way. This unthinking way has become part of the environment of Thieving Bear Planet. She was the toothsome, imaginative essence of all of you, the capriciousness or cultishness of you, and that made her very appetizing. We love essence. It's so concentrated. And somebody asks, why did you make her visible? Because we like to see what we're eating. Okay, now, go back to the beginning. Oh, good Lord, this is one of the coolest tricks I've ever seen Lafferty play. He says, and I noticed this part the first time because he lists them out so differently than he did, similarly but differently than in Snuffles, where he gives numbers and talks about each character. Here he says, now another expedition consisting of 6 explorers, George Mahoon, Wrestler Big, Elton Fad, with their, each with their little description. And Gladys Marclair, pleasant, capable. So Dixie Late Lark, sheer spirit, she.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
because
wonderful.
Lafferty talks like that all the time, you think he's just saying she was really
Exactly.
spirited. No, she's a spirit. She's your group spirit. Guess what? Count up the names.
Oh, good. That's what I was going to ask.
Not
Okay.
I was gonna say there's
There's 7.
That's wonderful.
And he lied to you and said a crew of 6, and then listed 7 people, and you didn't even notice. And
Good
then later
job,
said,
Daniel.
"Oh, yeah."
Way to go.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. I love that.
I'm sorry. Maybe I probably way oversold that, but
No,
That was awesome.
coming across it was just like I was laughing and kind of like feeling chills as I kept going back and forth and going, wait, what? Oh my god! Like,
So is
Yeah,
the
the
spirit
fact that
like
they're-
the chemistry of the group, the camaraderie, what is that essence then?
that's a good question.
like there's collective spirit of adventure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I think that's what also like it's significant that they didn't make fetish dolls and kill and become like mimic versions of any of the other crew members. I think they could only do it with the spirit. They're ghosts, so they can only play around like that with another ghost or a group spirit, a similar sort of being.
It could be the spirit of exploration.
Oh yeah,
that's cool. And they're literally mocking and like gothically executing this spirit of their exploration. That's hilarious.
Once again, these uninhabitable worlds that are so habitable, but you can't stay there.
You just can't stay there.
Yeah.
So this is the I think this is what threw me off with that other story where I thought that character was created by them, that it was like the planet created a 7th or 8th crew member that I was talking about in World Abounding. I mixed it up with this story,
right?
Where they created one, and I think it's super important when considering what that spirit was that we look at this last image, and I don't know if we're there yet.
Okay. Oh, you mean the spaceships?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me say a couple more things about the thieving bears. They're like, they asked, what are the thieving bears? And he says, oh, they're a sort of tumbleweed, a sort of nettle, which that alone, I was like, I love this story so much. We've been trying to figure out what these bears are the whole time, and then he's like tumbleweed, and that, just the picture. It's so great. And then he says, as Virgil's been pointing out, he says ghosts use them to get around in some of the time. So I myself am often a thieving bear.
So the bears existed on the planet before the ghosts.
Apparently.
Yeah, interesting.
This is another example of this thing I've been talking about, this symbiosis over and over again in one form or another. Humans come and the planet says, we're going to meld in some way, and in this case, it's with like leftover human psyche melds with planetary flora.
Yeah. Wow.
And floats around.
That's so cool. That's such a wonderful uncovering. That's fantastic.
He says it is only on the electric nights that we can inflate ourselves with enough plasm to look like ourselves. We walk here a lot because we're hungry and restless. And then he talks about that thing I said about eating metals and minerals, and that makes you more chill. But if you don't get those, you walk around looking for something to eat. And then there's this great part. They also ask, where did the little bears come from? Remember, there's like little kid ones? Because these are like ghosts, people's leftover psyches. Where do you get little bears? From a very early landing, perhaps the earliest, for they were here when I arrived. It was an ill-advised settlement expedition of men, women, and children.
Oh, yeah.
Then all died of starvation, not knowing how to turn the lush grass into food. They were the first of the hungry ghosts. It was their crying hunger that has drawn all the ships to land in this one place. Come, let us eat you, is their cry. And it is still a most passionate cry. And they talked about in the beginning, they're like, why does everybody land in this spot? And this is his explanation for that.
I hate to do this again, but in Japan and Buddhism and China, there are ghosts called hungry ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
Like straight up, they're called hungry ghosts and are constantly looking for eating. I think he might have known a little bit about Japan or Buddhism or something.
Yeah, sure seems like it. Or he has to have some kind of similar source. Like I said, his main Asian connection that I know of is Papua New Guinea, and I forget what the other places are called, but Indonesia, basically, where he served in the war. And he has said that he like literally listened to local indigenous storytellers a lot and like absorbed what they're talking about. And it's in configuration of the North Shore. That's the area he's talking about when he talks about the big mountain full of water and all that stuff. But
wow.
And back to the Japanese thing, I just want to say also that and you probably heard me say this already, but I'm going to say it for this video, that Lafferty has a very, very avid Japanese readership. Like, I would say more than anywhere else I've seen in the world. They love Lafferty and they celebrate him. Like, when he had his centennial or whatever, he was on the cover of their major SF magazine, like a drawing of him. And they included stories with fresh drawings and stuff. And they've recently put out unlike here, they've put out gorgeous new multi-volume best ofs, like affordable, but like with cool covers and like better selections. Like, they get in, they like the weird stuff. They're not going to not include Snuffles and Thieving Bear and stuff. They're all about it. You know what I mean? So I'm so glad you're bringing up all that stuff. And one more thing in that connection is, I had been wondering in Past Master, it talks in the feral regions, when it gets past just like big predaceous megafauna and stuff, it gets weirder and weirder, and at one point starts talking about flesh-eating ghosts. And I've been puzzling over, like, what is a flesh-eating ghost? And I completely forgot about that Japanese connection.
Yeah, hungry ghosts. Virgil, did you do a video about a short story, a science fiction story that is beloved in Japan that not many people have read out here?
Yeah, it was a James Tiptree Jr. story.
Yeah.
And apparently, who's kind of a known but not a particularly large science fiction writer. I mean, she has a presence,
right,
but not. And there is this one particular story. So she has a presence. Her name is not unknown in science fiction, certainly.
Right.
But she has a story, specifically one part of a story, like a short kind of like a novella in a short story collection. One of the last ones she made called The Only Neat Thing to Do.
Yeah, The Only Neat Thing to Do.
And it's somehow the Japanese culture like latched onto this story, and it's been reprinted. I think they referenced it in Evangelion and other anime. They've referenced it. It's so there's a lot of like energy. They have like luxurious editions. They actually retitled. It's from a collection called The Story Rip. They've actually retitled it in Japanese, The Only Neat Thing to Do, and it's actually like it's in their vernacular. There was this really interesting post where it's like a part of Japanese vernacular is to say that this phrase, and that story, I don't know if I want to spoil it, but it's a very interesting story about a person having a symbiotic relationship with an alien creature, and then like the very difficult decision that has to happen as a result of that relationship.
I love the concept that the Japanese sci-fi readers will accept more strangeness, because of course if you read any Kobo Abe or any of the more modern sci-fi writers, they Kudahashi Yumiko is one. They do some weird sci-fi stuff. So I guess, I think it makes sense that Lafferty would do well over there. Some of the stranger stuff. That's awesome. That's probably a topic for another video, but very cool.
Yeah.
Great video, Virgil. I loved that video.
Thank you.
I need to go watch that one. That sounds good.
Me too.
Okay, so that's, I think, all I have on all this. My next bit is on Manbreaker Crag. So does anybody else want to say anything about
We need more Manbreaker Crag. What's the
what?
We need more Manbreaker Crag. It's just we all know it.
He's going to be a cult hero, I can tell.
Yes. And with his
I got nothing else about Dixie.
Ghost and his body, we've got like Manbreaker on Manbreaker action. But anyway.
So we do know somebody died on this planet. You're absolutely right.
Oh, of course. If he's dead. Yeah. Okay. So you have already mentioned, Chris, that he says this thing, and I'm just going to read it out. He says, now it talks about him like speaking in like a soft roar or something. And Lafferty does a lot of that kind of thing. And I'm not going to try to do that, but I would love to hear actors kind of get into some of this stuff sometimes. But anyway, he says, I'm not a person to crawl into pieces of nettle or tumbleweed or any weeds except my own mortal weeds. I'm not one to take on the form of a cutie giggling bear or other toy. I am not a ghost nor any part of a ghost story. Ghost stories are for children and cutie bears. I am a simple dead man who is restless and hungry on this mineral poor world. On electric nights, I go get my own body where I keep it. I enter it and I inflate it with the crackling lightning and the electricity that is gathered here. I'm a hungry dead man with a dead man's temper. Don't mess with me.
Somebody just got to do a Manbreaker Craig video. Just all about Manbreaker Craig.
Yeah.
Manbreaker lore.
Like one of those sergeants who are in training for the military. It's got to be one of those kind of guys saying these lines.
Yeah, he is. That's the voice. That's probably the voice that Lafferty's probably getting at, and from experience, having been in the army. But yeah, he's like, "Listen up, you maggots!"
Yeah.
He's like, "That's stuff for children and cutie bears."
Well, in the other story that. But then when I found him
like a pro wrestler. Anyway, go ahead.
When I found him again, of course, he's saying these are the manly names that you should take, and he comes up with all those names.
Good boy, barrel house.
Oh, Manbreaker Craig. I keep wanting to call him Craig.
Manbreaker Craig.
There's no I in his name.
I like that he has a normal name too.
That's what he goes by at the yacht club. When he's not, he can finally just be himself and wear a sweater around his neck. Like, hey, Craig. Anyway, man, this story is making us go really wild here. But yeah, and I just love the way he keeps saying cutie bears and stuff. I love the story so much. So, and I really did notice, I really feel that if you go back and look at the way he talks in 900 Grandmothers and the types of things he says, it's the same guy. I do think Lafferty's writing has, I would say, developed or maybe just changed a bit by this time, so that the way he speechifies in 900 Grandmothers is a little different than here. In 900 Grandmothers, he's got more of that regional yarn type quality. Like, we're going to put a rump roast and whatever, and here he does still, he says cutie bears and everything, but he gets a little more kind of eloquent, as we'll see in something he says in a minute too. He goes on this big disquisition. He says, what we eat out of your minds are the most serious things that your minds are capable of holding. What we steal and eat out of your bodies are the tastiest things in your bodies. This is a great line. We come to table on you and we feast on you. What we eat out of your ships and your stores are the most nourishing and sophisticated things you have brought. Watto metal, data gelatin, electronic Rita, I forgot to look that up, codified memories and processes. We eat these things because we are hungry, and I eat them more ravenously than do any of the others. I eat the essence of minds and leave gibbering idiocy in its place. I eat the bodies of whole people where they stand.
There's a beginning part to that quote where he says, don't believe what the other ghosts say. We don't eat the things you don't need. And I think that's super important. He's like, straight up, I'm going to tell you straight. We take all your good stuff. Your good stuff. Yeah.
Good point. Because he says that the other ghosts kind of justify it, and they say, it's a good deal for both of us.
Right.
And Manbreaker's like, nah. And what I got strong shades of here was Uden, the nothingness monster in Past Master, has a speech kind of similar to this, with the same kind of like self-important eloquence, and says things like, I eat you up, I devour you, I suck you dry, and that kind of stuff. So I think there's some things to be drawn there. Okay, so if you have nothing more to say about that. Also, I just think, okay, this is probably something we just can't get into, but let's just note it, that this whole idea of what they're eating is fascinating, because the most nourishing and sophisticated things he says, and then he lists out not only things in their bodies or whatever, but technology basically, and outer and inner technology, as it were, the Watto metal, the type of hardware you've got, but also the software, data stuff, and kind of like circuit boards or something, and it's I don't know, I feel like there's something there. Why would the cast off or forgotten intuition of somebody, left somewhere, be so hungry for that kind of stuff? What's going on there? I mean, I don't think we can answer it right now. I think that's something that has to sit with us, but you can take a stab if you want.
I think Richard was close with the answer to that with his final image.
I'm not sure exactly how to approach that, but that final image of the space field again, where they all came to,
which we're ready to do that now, so we can just
go for it. Okay.
Yeah.
So all this consumption of technology includes the consumption of these spaceships themselves, and the ghost of John Chancel warns them and says, "Hey, you have only one chance really to get off this planet if you take your, I guess it would be the exit capsule off your spaceship to space and escape, because we're going to consume it all and we're coming for that as well. And then you're going to be stuck and you're done for here." And so this image that we had at the beginning of them coming down, like I have this image from them coming through the clouds and coming down to this plane, and you see all this outline of spaceships. It actually is those spaceships, just kind of the leftover chalky remains of the technology and metal that were there that has been consumed by these thieving bears. And it's beautiful. And I think is beautiful. It's in terms of what it looks like. The visual of it is very beautiful. It's horrific in its own way, though, too. And that's not it. That's not the end either. And I'll let someone else go to the end part there. There continues to be more after that moment. I could have simply ended there and I would have been happy.
Me too.
Let's hold off on that last ending bit for a second.
Well,
about this.
I do want to say that the outlines of the ships to me seemed like blueprints. Just the drawing idea of the spaceship, right? Just the outline of the spaceship. And what I took from that image is that this is what's leaving. The bears still everything and leave the idea, the imprint. And that's what brought me back to that husk and the idea of the meat's been eaten out, leaving only the notion, and the notion is just a husk of the original. So I think these humans are leaving that are kind of husks. They're not the same. They have had, as Manbreaker Crag said, the best parts eaten out of them.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's kind of how I tied up that central image.
Man, there's a couple things going on there. Oh, so now I'm wondering, I never noticed this before. Did the previous explorers then, they must have escaped with their capsules as well then.
That's what I would read it as.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have been able to say otherwise. These capsules must be good for some long journeying or something, because how do they? But I just think that it's strange that if that's it. So thinking about the meat and ideas versus notions and shells. Okay, so what's the meat that they're eating in this technology, and why? I just love, because it feels like it is taking like a Japanese hungry ghost or something to the stars in a proper science fiction mode, by making it deal directly with technology, which is a weird mashup, but they're hungry to eat the meat of technology. I just don't know what that means, but I think it's kind of profound and interesting.
Maybe it's because it's the most important. Maybe they just eat what is the most important. That's kind of what Crag says, but I don't know.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Is their technology their culture, and are they now? Is it because everything that the bears are described eating in the first half are all kind of like cultural tokens or something, like French novels, in comic books? They're all sort of like cultural representations of things. Are they eating up their culture? I don't know if that might be reaching there. I don't know.
That's quality. I think that's at least partly right, because we forget that technology is culture. We think it's like this separate thing, but it arises from and further creates more culture. You know what I mean?
Watching my kid grow up with technology I never had and
Yeah.
being different than I was shows that it is absolutely culture.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
live in a different culture than we did.
But as
Oh, you know
Manbreaker
what?
Craig said, they're looking for the best of things. And
Yes.
so it seems like it's the best of some of the cultural things that they had there. They like the certain scent better than all the other scents. And
Oh,
perhaps this is a pinnacle of humankind technology, are these
Mm.
spaceships as well. And that's
Yep.
part of their consumption.
Okay, so two quick things on that. One is that just a tiny little connection here is that I'm now reminded of John Chancellor that Richard pointed out is like fondly the controls that he's never seen because he's just like, oh, I used to drive these things. This is so new and updated. This is awesome. And it's like making me think like that just really ties into their hunger for technology. They love it, you know? And on a bigger scale, when you just said that there, I'm like, okay, this is a good example of how Lafferty meshes pretty perfectly a critique of sort of overweening hubristic like science and technology.
mm-hmm.
He does it throughout his stuff, whilst also affirming the sheer value and goodness of science and technology. You know what I mean? Because he's like, every time these astronauts and scientists try to understand these anomalies, he's like humbling them. Like you can't figure everything out, but in a way that like still affirms like, yeah, science and technology is awesome. It's one of the great things. And almost like he's saying, let's keep it a great thing by not like making it the be all end all, the only way to like know things. And I like in my studies, I run into this a lot. Like a lot of people think, and not it's in popular culture as well. A lot of people think science, and maybe you guys think this, and that's fine. We can have that conversation. But that science is kind of the main way to know stuff. And if there's any other ways, like through philosophy or psychology or literature or whatever it may be, they're lesser ways. And this is why Lafferty has a cycle of stories called about the Institute for Impure Science, because he thinks science, which is just knowing, knowledge in the Latin or whatever, is ways of knowing. And he's saying science is awesome, but there are other sciences like comparative mythology and psychology and anthropology and just literature and on and on and on it goes. It does. I don't know if that's making any sense, but and I know it's just almost just hinted at here in this particular story, but it's just even symbolically like the eating up, the crunching down, the reducing down of an actual physical piece of technology, humbling it, bringing it down low to sheer dust, because from the ghost perspective, it's one of the best things. I mean, are you feeling that at all? Like that kind of that strange, like it needs to be tied up a little bit more. But there's something there that is hitting me like it's kind of profound, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't make sense and I need to just keep working on the theory.
I think you could also connect the digging machine to that. It is interesting that you brought up the digging machine because it was a background concept to me, but you're right. Lafferty has a tendency to really truly love these pieces of tech. But it is interesting that this is what gets eaten. And he seems, if I were to guess, he seems more interested in kind of human foibles. But yeah, that is interesting. The concept that he's, yeah, that's and of course all my science buddies call everything soft science that isn't like one of the big ones, but yeah, I like that concept that there's I think you're onto something, and you're right. I think it would have to be really thought out and considered, but yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, and just to say that I do think whatever he's trying to say about science and different things, I do think that's an issue for him of human foibles. Just another variety of that.
Yeah. And we end with witchcraft, I think.
Yeah. I just want to say too about the plane of old spaceships. Like I remember the first time I just read that phrase at the beginning of the story, it just really hit me. I was just like, whoa,
it's like a graveyard.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when he said what they looked like, I was just like, and then it comes back around and ties in so well. I just love the story.
This would make a great graphic novel by a superior artist.
Yeah,
definitely. I think so.
I can picture. I wouldn't necessarily trust it, but I could picture again, the people who make the Prometheus movies or whatever. Somebody, I can almost picture it could go really bad, but I could almost picture that a spaceship at the end, viewed from above, just going,
and
just like crunching down to dust. That could be an epic scene, But I'm just going to say the ending. They write down this very story that you have just read in their own viscous, coagulated blood.
Yep.
As if this story needed anything else.
They consumed all the ink. And at the beginning, it talks about how this wasn't written in ink as well. It ties right back again to that beginning.
Yep.
And this is a way, again, I don't mean to bang on this too much, and we could frame it different ways than just like Catholic theology or whatever, but whatever, his sacramental ontology, like he likes to bring it in through carnival and grotesque ways, but so many of his stories involve blood because he's like, I like blood. Blood's what's inside of us. Blood is important, like bodies are important, like it's similarly to like the science and technology. Like clearly there's something spiritual that Lafferty cares about, with the interiority of human beings and how important that is. But it's either completely meshed with or in some kind of important interrelation with all this physical stuff. And so he's it's just going to be like, write it all out in blood, and oh. And you said something about witchcraft, maybe.
Yeah, writing in blood seems like a real kind of culty thing to do. I don't know. It's getting late out here now. I can't imagine. It's going to be morning for you sometime real soon here.
Yeah, sun's coming up.
For those watching,
the clouds.
I think Daniel's at about 4 or 4:30 a.m. at his time.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I'm going to look back on this segment and be like, I'm just going to cut myself out of all of this.
No, you're doing good. You're doing good.
I think the viewers will love it.
Yeah.
Especially as lucid as you are.
Especially when we really started breaking up laughing about Man-Breaker Crag. That's a great part of the
video. I love this story so much. I've said that so much, but I really do. And it really helps to bring it out talking with other people about it. So let me, if it's okay to close, I'd like to read some of the things that Vandermeer says and see what you think of his comments here. So one of the things he says is, too often science fiction gives us humans in uncanny bear suits, so to speak, when it comes to aliens. But Lafferty, in this story and several others, manages to create deeply strange and original alien encounters that both unsettle the reader and send up traditional science fiction approaches. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes is an okay answer. We can stop it.
I'll just say, I read a book recently that is not at all like Lafferty, but somehow I just thought the imagination for alien and other worlds, that Stanislav Lem resonates with it for me.
Yep.
And I know it's a weird association, but I think there's something there.
Yeah.
100% agree. I still have only read Solaris, and it's one of the best things I've ever read. And even just from the memory of it, I have often thought about it. Because that's that real incommensurability between, one, species or being and another, and not being able to understand each other. And Lafferty approaches something very similar in his own very different way,
And I think that's what Vandermeer is getting at there, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I do think what's funny about this comment, though, is that in Thieving Bear in particular, which this is what he's writing about, we literally have humans in uncanny bear suits, or the ghosts of humans inside these weird plants.
Yeah,
that are also bears or pack rats.
Did Lafferty get anything in
no,
this?
I don't remember because I made a spreadsheet at one point. I don't remember Lafferty being in that book.
Is
Dang.
that Barlow?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember trying to look through and I didn't feel like I saw anything, although I think I either saw some things that reminded me of Lafferty stuff or I think one or two things honestly made me wonder, but that's been a long, long time ago, and I don't have that book.
Too bad. I was hoping he was in here. Maybe they're too alien to be drawn.
Maybe. I think they could be drawn.
Yeah, I don't remember Lafferty being in there. He's not in the. I mean, he didn't write as much fantasy, but there's a fantasy variety too, and I don't remember him being in there either, unfortunately. Because I was thinking the same thing. Like, is he? I'm like, no, I made a list. I looked into each name, and I don't remember looking him up. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think so. But I did think when we were talking about Snuffles, I was definitely making a comparison. Like, this is so, like, when we were talking, I hadn't occurred to me, but I was making comparisons in my head to Solaris. We're talking about the planet as a thing, and I'm like, this is kind of like like the planet's responding, or maybe that was not so. It was the story I didn't. It's the story I didn't read. The Worlds Abounding. That's the one I meant to say. That has a Solaris effect because the planet's trying is communicate. Maybe that's how it communicates with it. What's it?
Yeah.
I made that, but of course I didn't read it, so I can't say much about it.
I think you're right, though, in noticing that connection. And I think somebody said, I think maybe it was Chris, that it seemed maybe in all of these, it seems like the planets themselves are part of like this whole response. And there was a hint in something specific that was said here in Thieving Bear that kind of hinted at that as well. And I think that's what gives some of that Solaris connection. It does, even if only symbolically, it does often feel like it's the planet itself as a character kind of responding to these humans.
Mm.
So another thing Vandermeer says is that the frame story of this one, with the whole like cataloging and trying to clear up the anomaly, it says that it tries to impose a cage of logic on the unknowable. And I think that's pretty straightforward. Doesn't necessarily need comment, but I think we've all been kind of saying something like that. He says, I like this thought. I'm not sure how these tie together, but he says visceral is a key word when thinking of Lafferty's triumphs alongside weird. And I think this whole bodily thing I'm talking about gets to that visceral. In, again, a condensed tale-like form, Lafferty accomplishes what some space operas take trilogies to get to. I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel like he's done a lot with a little to give us a sense of like all these planets and interconnection and travels and different things. He says, with Lafferty, the traditional tropes of SF, alien contact, alien invasion, the noble exploration of space, are like jewels he puts beneath tattered, overturned cups, daring the reader to bet on where in the world the true treasure lies. But beware, when you pin down the location of that treasure, it'll likely change shape, grow legs, and hop off the table. And I just feel like that describes these stories. We're like, here's the treasure. Oh my God, it's like moving.
Yeah, they're all a little slippery, aren't they? They're all a little bit. You can't really get a hold of them, the first time.
Yeah, and related to that, he says Lafferty isn't content. He's restless. It would have been easy enough for him to take the initial setup of Thieving Bear to a very satisfying conclusion, but instead he roughs up and destabilizes his own story with the second act, which makes the reader question, well, everything.
Yeah.
And he says, the story chronicles the impossibility of comprehension of the alien, the war between the logical and illogical in ourselves that spills out into the cosmos beyond, all in the context of certain knowledge that human beings will never know everything about this world, let alone the next, or the universes we inhabit, and that there's something wonderful about that fact. Now, there's a key for me. What do you think about that? There's all this sense of unknowability, mystery, grotesquerie within all that danger, dwarfing of us. Just, it's a wild, crazy world. And that's kind of wonderful. Do you think that's Lafferty? Do you think that's right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, yeah, I just talking about these stories and reading it, and and kind of something I sort of said in another video with us, that yeah, there's this sense of like not taking a traditional approach, and then also sort of like reveling in not really getting an answer. It's like, this is a thing, this is how this is. You don't get an answer, but that even though you don't necessarily get an answer, that doesn't mean it doesn't make sense, or that it has a sense that doesn't, you can't necessarily apply your logic to. If that, I don't know if that's clear or not, but
yeah, no,
but I think there is something. It's like you, like that other video you had where you talked about like this sort of mythic quality, that where you don't have to actually even read the myth. The relating of the myth is almost enough for you, and it touches something. And in that same sense, I do feel like some of these encounters, like they just feel right, even if they're so bizarre. Like there's a sense to them. It doesn't seem like I never felt any of these things were like nonsense or just random.
Yeah.
You know?
That's brilliant, though. That's so good, because that's a key thing about Lafferty, is it feels random and chaotic, but it doesn't feel that way, you know. And it's like, no, there's a quality of randomness or just absurdity or weirdness, but there's also a cohesion and a coherence. And you are kind of saying better what I was trying to say about the whole science thing. If you think that the only way we can know things is through the measurements and experiments and so on of science, then you'll miss out on what you just said. Like that there is a kind of sense making that happens through, even in a sense, nonsense like this, you know, like, and maybe even going back to Lewis Carroll and stuff. But this is a way of knowing by being able to revel in unknowability. I know it sounds paradoxical, but you're likely to track onto truth a little better, in my opinion, and a lot of thinkers' opinions, if you're willing to admit the radical limitations of, say, our epistemology. You know, you'll be less likely to, I don't know, be fooled or something. I don't know. Now I'm rambling a bit, but so roughly, you know, it's just important to see that there's sense making in this kind of weirdness, and that's, yeah, we're kind of riffing now on what Vandermeer said, but that there's like a joy in not knowing sometimes.
It's, when I thought of that comment, I thought back to what I said earlier about kind of that childhood wonder that Lafferty stories were able to give me again, like watching Star Trek when I was a kid. When I would first put these stories down, and of course I was reading them on the computer, so I just kind of look up when I was done reading them. For a moment, everything seemed infinitely possible after each of these stories. Like the universe seemed huge and everything seemed possible. And I think Lafferty lulls you into that through his writing. Yeah. That's kind of how I took that quote.
No, that's perfect. I think that's probably even better what he's getting at there. Like, yeah, that there's, this is, how did he put it again? Oh yeah. The impossibility of comprehension of the alien, the war between the logical and illogical, the certain knowledge that human beings will never know everything about this world, let alone the next or the universes we inhabit, and that there's something wonderful about that fact. That's what creates that wonder, and that open possibility is that sheer like, oh yeah, we'll never know everything, you know, about all this stuff. And that kind of unlocks that wonder and a sense of possibility. You still said it better than I did. I should have just left it at what you said. So lastly, a quote where he says, "Not many writers could grapple with such ideas and create a story that's both so creepy and so funny and in the moment," italicized. But as in Lafferty's best work in general, the author manages to channel a narrative momentum and a kind of joy in the very act of outrageous and madcap invention that provides unity, depth, and yes, even a kind of beautiful closure. And I think he's just saying what we've been saying, basically, about particularly how this story works. Because it's amazing that he could be this bizarre, and yet it's so unified and deep and beautiful, and it has a closure to it. You know, it circles back, and forget about it.
I would never call him absurd.
Good.
I would never call this absurdism. in any way, shape, or form. And I think that it can sometimes seem to people that that's exactly what it is. And I think that he is really thinking very hard about what he's expressing and what he's putting down. So I think it's like you said earlier, I think there's a lot concrete here. Even though it parades around in a fashion that may seem absurd. But beneath it, it's not absurdism. It is concrete ideas and philosophies and thoughts that I think are really incredible. And that's what's drawn me to Lafferty. Is that ability to provide so much contextual evidence to these weird ideas, and leave us with very, very structured thoughts by using seemingly unstructured concepts, when in reality I think they really are.
Excellent. That's perfect. That is spot on. And I'm probably gonna pull that out as a soundbite and say, look, this is what Lafferty's about. All this time I've been trying to say it's not just random here. That's what it is. Okay, that's it of what I wanted to kind of cover about this story, I think. So any other sort of closing thoughts? Wow. That was a trip. I did not anticipate talking through these stories being such a wild journey. I mean, I should have, but that was
how many hours was that? 7?
I think we put in a shift.
Don't tell me I have 7 hours of video to edit.
Yeah, they're
close.
You got a big job ahead of you, Daniel.
Or you'll have lots of listen. All you have to do is edit it and just release it. It's already packaged. It's already created.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, man. That was a blast. I very, very sincerely appreciate this, quite apart from YouTube channels and getting likes and followers and whatever. Just really appreciate you guys taking the time to read this stuff and then have a deep conversation about it. That's awesome.
It was fun to get together with all of you and get to sort of just enjoy a conversation together.
Right. So for closing, dear Lord, what do I say? What am I supposed to say about all this? All right. Thank you guys so much for this amazing, amazing discussion. And thanks to everybody who actually made it through all these videos to the end. I feel like you must have enjoyed it if you went all the way through. There's no need to punish yourself and make yourself get through this. So I think, you've got something out of this. And I really look forward to hearing from people in the comments if this has spurred your own thoughts and interpretations about these stories and relations you see to other works by Lafferty that relate to all this kind of stuff, and or to other science fiction writers or other writers of any kind. But please join the discussion. And there will be more stuff on Past Master and beyond soon from this channel, and more great stuff from all these other channels as well. So thanks to Richard and Virgil and Chris, and to all you guys out there watching. All right. Take care. Bye.
Ghosts in the corner of my eyes. Etch always in lightning on the sky.
Oh, I'm just going to stop the video here now.
If we do this again, which I hope we'll have some reason to do it, we need to do a Lafferty drinking session. And if you don't drink, you can, and you don't mind watching people drink alcohol, you can bring a non-alcoholic beverage and do something else. But Lafferty was a big drinker, and we used to do this in a reading group online. We didn't do it on video. We just would say the beer we were pairing with the story that we were reading together. Or one guy did tobacco and did different tobacco every time and stuff like that. But so if you want to, we should bring a beer that pairs with the story we're talking about or something like that.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
It could be very interesting. Yeah.